Back in the good old days, if you needed to move your family, their luggage, and the mother-in-law, you bought an estate. But sadly, we've got MPVs and SUVs now, and mother-in-law jokes have become distasteful. What's more, modern estates favour style over space, so if you're looking for a proper box on wheels, you have to look to the 90s. This is the Vauxhall Carlton estate. It's imposingly big, unapologetically boxy, and its presence alone is enough to make the trousers of any of today's snowflake estates turn brown. Well, never in my wildest dreams did I think that on my crummy little YouTube channel I'd be test driving a 1993 Vauxhall Carlton estate. Yes, you may think that I'm completely mad for even giving this car a second look, because it's a heap of shit. But this is one of only 16 Vauxhall Carlton estates left on UK roads, according to the website howmanyleft.com. But another reason you shouldn't underestimate this car is that this was a proper 80s/90s estate car. Thin A-pillars and good load capacity. Now this is a typical Vauxhall interior from the 90s, and considering this would have been more expensive than, say, the Cavalier, it doesn't really have an awful lot of things different to what you'd have in a Cavalier. In here, well, the biggest thing by far is this steering wheel. It's like something on a boat, and when you feel how light the steering is, which of course we'll get to later, it really doesn't feel like you need it. Something else that surprises me about this car are the indicator stalks. Now, if you look at the ones on many Vauxhalls of the past, they feel very cheap and nasty to use, but these actually feel more higher quality than the ones that probably replace them. Now, these big armchair feeling leather seats really do add to the luxury here in the Carlton, but they don't really help with the coal mine vibes that I'm getting in here. Yes, Vauxhall designers went absolutely mad with their order form for the lashings of black plastic that we've got all around the cabin. Back in '93, the fog lights, ABS and four wheels seen on the Vauxhall Carlton will have been enough to give most sales reps a bit of a Vauxhall hard-on. But even today, the leather, sunroof and boy racer alloys are still an attractive proposition. Now obviously the Carlton doesn't score any points for a CD player or even a tape deck. The youths probably broke in and stole it, and that might explain why the central lock-in doesn't work on this car either. But it does score huge Matty's Cars points for this massive ashtray and cigarette lighter. So overall, a pleasing interior and equipment levels that would be expected in the 90s. But the real excitement is in the back. Now, I know I keep saying this, but this is a proper estate car. Style does not compromise space, because there was no style with the Carlton. It looks like a bloody hearse. But that means that you get loads of head and legroom here in the back. Now this seat is set for my identical twin, who's 6 foot, and I've got plenty of legroom here, and I can slide my feet under the seat, plus loads of headroom. There's also ashtrays on both of the doors here in the back of the Carlton, so if the kids want a bifter on the way to the family holiday in Prestatyn, they don't even have to share. Vauxhall promoted this car by saying it had the biggest payload in Europe, and to be honest with you, I'm willing to bet that that point still stands today. As you'll have seen from my earlier gymnastics, the Carlton's load space is colossal, and lock up your daughters, because with the seats folded flat, there's a total of 6 feet of space to play with. In fact, the whole brochure for the Carlton, including this dodgy photo and this one where the passengers look like they're on a water slide, is linked down below. Also, at the time of recording, this car was up for sale, but it's now found a new home. It's registered as Sawn and off the road, so hopefully the new owner is doing a little bit of work to get this Carlton back to its best. Well, I don't really know how to feel, to be honest. I am driving a Vauxhall Carlton estate, light blue, and it's older than me. This is probably one of the oldest cars I've ever driven. I don't know if I'm shouting. Well, I know I'm shouting, but I don't know how effective that's going to be and whether I need to shout. But it feels very noisy in here. There's a lot of squeaks and rattles. Anything that's made of plastic, which is everything, is rattling. The engine is a 1.8 petrol and it's done 152,000 miles. Now the engine to me actually feels tip-top. There's nothing untoward coming from the engine at all. And that's one thing they say about these Carltons, is that they were built to last. And they certainly were. The seat itself is like an armchair and I am comfortable, but the actual ride itself is a little bit firm, and I'm not sure how well you'd cope with the firmness of the ride on a long journey. Now, of course, the car that we all remember is the 90s drug dealer special car, the Lotus Carlton. Now, obviously, this is the regular version, but there's nothing to say that this isn't a car that you should have. I'm not gonna lie though, I feel like a geography teacher from the 90s driving this car, especially because it's the estate version. You know, the type that always stunk of coffee and BO. A bit like me when I was working for Deliveroo. I'm actually quite pleasantly surprised. I mean, 90s cars, especially the big ones, are synonymous with having very heavy steering, quite wallowy handling. It does feel a little bit wallowy, obviously, and that is to be expected, but you feel like you're in control of this car. The steering is actually quite nicely weighted, and it's the type of weight that you sort of get on my Saxo before the steering on cars became far too artificial. So I do really admire how this car handles. I think it's a good handling car for what it is. As we know, 90s automatic gearboxes, they can be a little bit clunky, a little bit pointless and a little bit useless, but this one is okay. Now obviously, this being a big massive car with a big massive petrol engine coupled with an automatic gearbox, it means that miles per gallon, well, I'm probably getting about 5. The likes of the Senator, the Cavalier and of course the Carlton were all once considered quite boring, run-of-the-mill choices when buying a used car, but now the Carlton is dangerously rare. And over 30 years after its launch in 1986, it still holds on to most of its attributes. Prices of the Carlton go between up to a couple of £100 to between 6 and 10 grand for a highly sought after GSI model. If you want an affordable, reliable, comfortable and in many cases unrivaled estate when it comes to space, forget your SUVs. What you need is a proper, full fat 90s estate.